I was with someone a couple of days back, and I noticed something peculiar about this person. In practically every sentence, this person would say, "Oh, this happened because it was the will of God," or he would say, "God willing." Now, let's understand this will of God properly. So, I will begin with one statement of Ramesh Balsekar, one quote, which says that the created object is you and me. The created object cannot know the will of the creator source. In other words, with our limited intellect, we cannot make sense of how and why God's will operates. Because we are created object and the finite intellect is too limited a tool to understand the immensity of creation or the cosmic law or God's will. But what happens is that we find ourselves repeating that very often. We would say, "Oh, everything is God's will. God willing, this will happen." But here's the thing, if you find yourself verbalizing that everything is God's will whenever you are in a difficult or a challenging situation, that could be, perhaps it could be, a situation where you're trying to avoid an uncomfortable emotion or an uncomfortable feeling, saying that everything is God's will. Now, if you are aware enough, you will notice this happening. Let's say when a loved one is ill, or if there is some financial loss, or if your partner or spouse cheats on you, or any misfortune, and we keep repeating to ourselves, "Oh, this happened because of God's will," then that is, in a way, assumption that I know what is God's will. And I keep repeating it to push down the feelings that I'm experiencing. I just don't want to experience the discomfort. So it becomes the mechanism of the mind to avoid pain by saying that everything is God's will. You see, this understanding that everything is God's will, it indeed is a recognition. It is not a personal understanding, it is not a concept that can be used to soothe oneself in difficult situations or challenging circumstances. There are some people who would be, let's say, in some serious illness and would surrender saying that, "Oh, I should do nothing because it's God's will that I will die." That is an assumption of the cosmic law. That is an assumption that I know what is God's will. And to say that I know what is God's will is to say that I know better than God. Therefore, you must do everything and anything in your capacity to heal your illness. Because to give up and to say that I will not do anything because this is happening as per God's will is an assumption. It is an assumption by the ego mind. How are you supposed to know that this is what God wants? Maybe the God wants you to fight the illness. Maybe the God wants you to take care of your health, to set some things right. So, but this may also happen that despite all you're doing, despite everything you have done in your capacity to fight your illness, the illness may still come back. The solution may not come. Therefore, will of God is a recognition. It is an understanding which is not to be verbalized. It is simply the recognition. And the person who truly has had this recognition would never say to another during their times of emotional upset or anything, they wouldn't say to them that you are suffering because it's God's will. They would simply be present around them, perhaps in silence, or they would perhaps comfort them through comforting gestures or anything of that sort. And this can be a very subtle thing because we don't get to know. The moment me says that I know what is God's will and keeps repeating it like a mantra, that is where the me creates separation with God. And that is where the suffering begins. Because at some point, life will break you down. And when the life breaks you down, this same me that says everything is God's will come up and say, but why God, why do you create suffering for me? When I am so good, when I believe in your will, then why do you create suffering for me? But the truth is that the me really does not believe in God's will. The me believes in its own will and only uses God's will as a concept to either propagate its own fantasy or to soothe itself. So whenever there is an arising of emotion because of an unfortunate event, let's say like a partner cheating on you, attend to that completely. Be fully present to that. Be fully aware and fully receptive and fully present to whatever is arising, which may include imagination like you saying mean things to your partner. Of course, there is a hurt inside, and such visions come up. If a business partner or let's say a friend has broken your trust, don't cover it up saying that it is God's will. That will create further pain. Attend to it properly. Attend to it completely with total vision. See what is going on. In your imagination, you are going to say hurtful things to your friend because you are hurt inside and you will be projecting that hurt on an imaginary screen. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. But that energy has to flow out of the system. Once the energy is completely seen, completely felt, then it has no further capacity to move or to find another to project on. Now, after that, you still may, confront your cheating spouse or your friend, who's treated you poorly. But that will not be out of anger. That will not be out of resentment. But for your own peace of mind and for your own sanity. because that is where you have completely accepted that everything is God's will.